Okay, this is going to be a very short one. We're going to be discussing, excuse me, we're going to be discussing accountability. So, that is question 2. It says, discuss accountability as a prerequisite for finding a person blameworthy when establishing delictual liability, and discuss the defenses to exclude accountability. In your answer, briefly refer to case law. Yes, so as usual, like I always emphasize, that when you start answering such questions, it's a very rich questions. It's a very rich question. It carries up to 20 marks. So you probably want to start with a definition. By starting with a definition, you're giving your reader a background and an understanding of what you're really talking about. And also you are also exhibiting your knowledge, that you do understand the concept. Okay, so with accountability, accountability refers to a person's capacity to appreciate between the right and the wrongs, and then act accordingly with that distinction. So it is the distinction, the person's capacity to be able to distinguish between right and wrong, and then act in accordance with that distinction. And with regards to accountability, it's very tricky, because if a person is not legally accountable, you cannot impute blame, and also the element of fault will not be satisfied. So dealing with the issue of accountability, we look at a couple of factors that determine fault, which can be youth, which is age, mental illness, intoxication. These can also act as defenses. With the youth, we're looking at the age of the defendant, if they're mature enough to distinguish between that right and wrong, and appreciate the distinction thereof. We also look at the maturity side of the defendant to determine whether they understand the difference thereof. So we can use in this particular topic of accountability, we look at the case of Weber versus Santam. I would assume that you know the details of that case, like the facts of the case. I would assume that you know already the facts of that particular case. So sorry, I got a little bit distracted. So in the case of Weber versus Santam, it was a case of a kid who was playing in the sand in front of a block of flats. His name was Marius. He was 7 years and 2 months old, and was run over by a car. A motorist was reversing from a parked position, and the issue in this case was whether Marius, the 7-year-old, had contributed, to him being run over by a car. So, and the court had to determine his capacity to be at fault. As we know that the capacity to be at fault is from 7 years going up, and Marius was only 7 years and 2 months old. So the evidence indicated that Marius' mother had previous occasions told Marcus to look out for cars whenever he's playing out in the sand, and that Marius did actually have time to assess the situation and ensure that he was playing at a place where he can not be run over by cars. But while we are saying this, remember that we're talking about a 7-year-old child who is just 7 years old and 2 months, even if they say that he can be accountable from the age of 7, was just 7 years old and 2 months. And some kids, they can still be 7, 8, some can still even be 10, but depending on how they're brought up, they can still not be able to distinguish between the right and the wrong. And we're dealing with the case of Marius, who is 7 years and 2 months and has been run over by a car. And they're telling us that he had enough time to assess the situation and ensure that he was playing at a place where he cannot be in danger. So, however, the appeals court, the appellate division at that time, it confirmed that the test of accountability is a subjective test. And by so, we look at our subject here, which is Marius, on his mental capacity at that particular time of the incident, with due regard to his abilities in that particular situation, you know. So Marius was just over 7, and the court said that as well as he was just 7, there's the importance of presuming that children between 7 and 14 are kappa in capax. You know, the court also warned against placing on head of adults' head on young shoulders. You know, like we're now automatically assuming that Marius is 7, therefore he should be able to act mature just because of his age, which was wrong. So in assessing Marius' capacity, the court took into account the fact that he had only just turned 7, as well as his intellectual development, maturity, and impulsiveness. The court found that Marius was aware of the danger of cars, as his mother always told him, and the inherent weakness associated with tender age and the propensity of children caused him to have a childlike preoccupation, making roads in the sand, which in turn deprived him of a consciousness of the surrounding activities and his mother's previous warnings. So the court accordingly held that Marius was, obviously he did have the capacity, but he did not contribute to the negligence of which they were saying that he did, and that he was entitled, you know, to the full amount of damages for that essence. Therefore, while Marius might have understood the difference between right and wrong, he lacked the maturity to act in accordance with such understanding. As you remember our definition, we said it refers to a person's capacity to appreciate between the right and wrong and in accordance with that. So Marius did have the capacity, but he did not, he did have the capacity. He did understand the difference between right and wrong. He just lacked the maturity. So therefore, he was not contributory negligent to this particular accident, right? And then the question also goes on to say, discuss the defenses to exclude accountability. So with regards to the defenses that will exclude accountability, I'm just going to touch on 2, which is first one, which is intoxication. It does have case law. And so in exceptional instances, people can be so intoxicated, as we all get intoxicated sometimes, that they cannot develop an intention. Intoxication is generally used as a ground to exclude accountability. However, a person can also use it to exclude either one or of the elements of intention. And there is a case, if you do know the Shredin case, I'm not going to dive into the facts of that case, but you do know that Shredin was drunk and he was driving, and there was a group of people on the road, and Shredin ran over them with him expecting that people will move out of the way. because of the level of the intoxication that he was under. So he expected them to move out of the road, and they didn't move, and he ran over them. You understand? So we can still use intoxication as a ground of justification when it comes to accountability. We can also use provocation. So a person can raise provocation as a defense to exclude the intention, although somebody that has been provoked may still have directed, their will, to injure the other person who was provoking. But the courts can exclude intention when the provoked person did not realize that his or her conduct was wrongful. So just to recap, accountability refers to a person's capacity to appreciate between the right and the wrongs and then act in accordance with that. And then the case that we used here was the case of Weber versus Santam, where Marius, a 7 and 2 months old boy, was run over by a car in the parking lot. And the argument was, did Marius contribute negligently to this accident? And the court found out that although Marius was 7 years and 2 months old, he did understand between the right and wrong, and his mother had warned him several times to be very careful when he's playing out in the sand. But Marius lacked maturity, to appreciate the distinction, of understanding between right and wrong. And also the defenses, we used intoxication and provocation, and you might as well throw in the Schradin case to support the defense of intoxication. Thank you.